register to vote in North Carolina.
Yeah, I was not registered to vote either.
Yeah. Sim shalom, tova uvracha ba'olam, chen v'chesed v'rachamim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha. Grant peace, goodness, and blessing in this world, grace, love, and mercy over us and over all your people. Barchenu avinu kulanu ke'echad be'or panecha. Bless us, source of being, all of us, as one amid your light. Ki ve'or panecha natzata lanu Adonai Eloheinu Torat Chaim, ve'avat chesed u'tzedakah uvracha, berachamim v'chaim v'shalom. For by your light, source of life, our God, you give us Torah of life, of love and kindness, justice, blessing, mercy, life, and peace. V'tov be'einecha levarech et amcha, Yisrael ve'et kol ha'amim berov oz v'shalom. So may it be a good thing in your eyes to bless all your people Israel and all peoples with abundant strength and peace. Baruch atah Adonai, oseh hashalom. Blessed are you, compassionate one, maker of peace. And let us all say, Amen.
On behalf of the entire staff of Duke University Chapel and the Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Committee, I welcome you to this special commemorative service in honor of the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In January 1956, during the Montgomery bus boycott, Dr. King received a threatening phone call late at night, and he bowed his head at the kitchen table and prayed to God. He said that through this prayer, he received inner calm and recognized how God was able to give him interior resources to face the storms and problems of life. Thus, Dr. King's prophetic work was rooted in the posture of prayer, revealing the connection between action and contemplation. So today, in honor of Dr. King, let us pray. God of our weary years, and God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far along the way to today, we come this afternoon like empty pitchers to a full fountain, with no merits of our own. Open up a window of heaven as our rejoicing rises high as the listening skies, in gratitude for the words, life, and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. As we gather to remember and to celebrate his dream, we recognize that many are living a nightmare, because many still don't believe that we exist in an interconnected web of mutuality in which our destinies are tied together. We recognize that there are unfulfilled dreams and even shattered dreams because we have not seen the jangling discords of the nation transformed into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood and sisterhood. We acknowledge that we have not yet seen all of God's children joining hands and singing, because we still see people being judged by the color of their skin and not the content of their character. We even confess that at times we have become silent about things that matter, and our silence is a betrayal. Forgive us, O God. And though we confess this truth, believing that the truth will set us free, we still cry out in hope, precious Lord, take my hand. Lead me on, let me stand. I'm tired, I'm weak, I'm worn, because we still believe in your dream for the world, embodied through Dr. King. Even while we lament, we hope. We dream. We dream the impossible dream in recognition that nothing is impossible with you, our Creator. We dream a world of peace justice, love, and mercy, a world where these virtues would roll down like waters and ever-flowing streams. Give us the courage to hope and to hold fast to dreams, that where there is hatred, we would sow love, and where there is injury, we would sow pardon, and where there is doubt, we would sow faith, and where there is despair, hope, and where there is darkness, light, and where there is sadness, joy, that we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, that we may not so much seek to be understood as to understand, that we may not so much seek to be loved as to love. For we know that hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Only love can cast out the fear in our hearts. Let nothing separate us from your love, that we might be agents of love in the world, that there might be peace on earth beginning with us. So amid the nightmarish realities of our current day, may your dream come true, such that earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty, enabling us to face the rising sun of a new day begun, and to honestly, truthfully, and jubilantly sing the words of the spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. And all of God's people said, Amen.
Reverend King was a prophetic witness who inspired people across many faith traditions. On behalf of Religious Life at Duke and Duke Voices for Interfaith Action, we light this candle as a reminder that God's light can shine through any anguish. And as we remember those who continue to struggle with oppression and injustice, we are reminded to continue to carry the light of peace, hope, and justice in this world.
On behalf of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commemoration Committee, I welcome you here this evening. I welcome you to the annual commemoration of the life and legacy of Dr. King. The Commemoration Committee this year has chosen the theme, From King to Kaepernick, Progress Through Protest. And this theme recognizes the necessary activism on the part of all of us. This theme recognizes the power of nonviolent protest to highlight the power to amplify the overt, the implicit, the systemic, and often structural inequities in our nation. From Montgomery to Birmingham, to Albany, Georgia, to Selma, to the athletic fields across our nation, the power of protest shines a light forward. In the words of Dr. King, we who engage in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of tension. We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that is already alive. And so it's our responsibility to turn the tension into forceful, constructive steps that move us forward towards that beloved community that Dr. King so frequently and eloquently spoke of. So I welcome you to the 2018 Dr. Martin Luther King commemoration. And now it's my pleasure, my great pleasure, to introduce the president of Duke University, Dr. Vincent E. Price.
As president of Duke University, it is my great honor to welcome you to this historic chapel for a celebration of the life of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. We gather today as well to celebrate the trailblazing legacy of Dr. Samuel Du Bois Cook, Duke's first African-American professor, who passed away in May. I am also honored to welcome our distinguished guests, our colleague and Mayor Steve Schewel, our other elected officials, Dean Powery, and today's speaker, Sherilyn Ifill, the President and Director Counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund. We are, of course, not alone in this important commemoration. Every January, we join a great fellowship of towns and cities, schools and universities, congregations and communities of faith, and families and individuals around the world in remembering Dr. King's abiding contributions to justice and equality. Indeed, this celebration marks the passage of time at Duke, coming as it does after so many commemorations over the years. And here in this historic chapel, we have hosted such luminaries of the civil rights movement as Ambassador Andrew Young, Harry Belafonte, Marian Wright Edelman, Maya Angelou, and the Reverend Joseph Lowry. And outside of these stone walls, beyond the stained glass, generations of Duke students, faculty, and staff have joined together each year in service to Durham and the surrounding region. But these events don't simply mark the passage of time. They also provide an opportunity to reflect on the progress we've made toward Dr. King's vision of equality. They serve as a reminder of our responsibility to resist the forces of hatred and division that are not yet fully vanquished. A reminder that only through empathy, righteous witness, and a conviction to learn from the past can we ensure that the arc of the moral universe bends ever closer to justice. This year, that reminder holds particular resonance for the Duke community. As many of you know, we have been engaged over these past few months in a difficult but productive conversation about our university history, a conversation informed by Dr. King's example and the struggle for civil rights. Led by a commission on memory and history, we have come together as a community to reflect on our past and to take formal steps to build toward a more inclusive future. We have adopted new principles for engaging with controversy and injustice in Duke's history. That conversation will continue this spring and beyond with exhibitions, panel discussions, and community events. And we will proudly open a new research center to address disparities in clinical care. We have also renewed our community commitment to defending the right of all of our fellow students, faculty, staff, and neighbors to participate fully in university life in accordance and alignment with our abiding values of service, learning, and faith. These conversations have never been more important, as we have witnessed the tragic violence in Charlottesville, the shocking revival of white supremacy, the demonstrations in downtown Durham, and events at this very chapel. Many of you already know that Dr. King visited our campus in 1964 and gave a speech in Page Auditorium right next door. The Duke of Dr. King's visit was still in the vice grip of a segregationist South. I've even been told that he spoke at Page only after he was denied the opportunity to preach from this pulpit. But because of his vision and his labor, And with the support and struggle of many like him, progress was already underway. Just a year before his visit, the university had admitted the first African American undergraduates, breaking the policy of discrimination that had governed our admissions since this institution's founding. Over the intervening decades, through years of tension and protest, we would begin to build a university that lives up to our values. We would endeavor to learn from the past and to mark the passage of time with confident steps toward justice. At Duke, Dr. King repeated a refrain from his speeches throughout the South, from Birmingham to Richmond. The time is always right to do what is right. Today's celebration comes as we at Duke are taking action to continue our progress toward the future Dr. King wanted. That progress isn't easy, and we may lose our footing from time to time or lose ground along the way. But we must continue to step forward for what's right, moving toward a community that can be an example to our neighbors and to the world.
My friends, on behalf of the City of Durham, I bring greetings on this important day in Duke Chapel. First, I want to say a word to President Price. President Price, I have 2 degrees from Duke. I teach at Duke. And as a loyal Duke alumnus and as mayor of Durham, I want to offer my thanks to you for your prompt and bold action to remove the damaged statue of Robert E. Lee from the door of this chapel. My friends, isn't it a compelling moment to be gathered here at this chapel on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, when this chapel itself has become a site of conscience in our struggle for racial equality? I came to Duke in 1969 from my hometown of Lynchburg, Virginia. My parents were civil rights liberals, but I was definitely steeped in the culture of the lost cause at the same time. I celebrated most of my birthdays on the battlefields at Appomattox, and in my bedroom was a painting of Stonewall Jackson falling at Chancellorsville. And yet I know, as you know, that the Confederate monuments across the South must come down. They are a public glorification of the defenders of slavery, and we cannot let that stand. And so I deeply understand the emotions that led people to damage the statue of Lee right here and to pull down the Confederate monument outside the old courthouse in downtown Durham not long ago. As my friend in the Sanford School of Public Policy, Professor Deandra Rose, wrote to me recently, the removal of the Confederate statue in Durham feels like a bold pushback against white supremacy and everything that happened in Charlottesville. I agree. But I also deeply feel the need for a peaceful way forward that involves our entire community in this work, that doesn't just confront people, but that also educates them and brings them along with us. So it is the way forward from here. I admire the process very much that Duke has initiated, and let me talk about what we're going to be doing in Durham. In 2015, our state legislature passed a pernicious law which takes away Durham's right to make our own community decisions about monuments on public property. It's true, however, that before this recent legislation, Durham had not even begun to face up to the memorials to the Confederacy that are still in our midst, whether these memorials be statues or street names on public property or built into the front door of Duke Chapel. Durham is on the progressive edge of so much, but we have not led the way on this issue with a kind of thoughtful, inclusive process that some communities have initiated. So now we're getting started. First, we're initiating a transparent, inclusive community process to examine all historical remnants publicly memorializing slavery in Durham, to decide what to do in each case. Are there street names that need to be changed, statues that need to be moved, removed, or contextualized in a history museum? Always our objective needs to be to ease the pain of our neighbors whose ancestors suffered as slaves. We must center their voices, and we must live up to Durham's highest ideals. Second, we will take the case for removal of these monuments to the North Carolina Historical Commission, which must approve these removals under the state law. Make no mistake, this state law is meant to defend the Confederate statues and inhibit the power of cities like Durham. But there is a process, so we must use it as only Durham knows how. Once Durham has decided on a course, if necessary, we will take our case to the Historic Commission. We will be there in great numbers, peaceful but resolved. I'll be there to speak out, and I hope you will be there too. Third, we will think as a community about what new monuments we do want to erect. Are there heroes in Durham's history who deserve a memorial in their honor? Whom should we honor in the place of the statue that came down? How can our public memorials reflect our civic values and honor the best in our past? Fourth, we must do the things that really matter on a daily basis to counter the effects of slavery and Jim Crow, which will remain with us still. Let's apply a racial equity lens to all of our government decisions, as I and my city council colleagues strive to do now, and I see my colleague Deidreana Freeman here with us today. Let's make sure that policies and budgets relating to schools, housing, policing, and jobs keep racial equity at the forefront. On this Martin Luther King Day, 50 years after his assassination, that is what we are pledged to do in Durham. Again, on behalf of the city of Durham, I bring greetings to all assembled here today in this holy chapel, made holier this year as a site of conscience in the long struggle for racial justice. Thank you.
Good afternoon. As president of Duke Hospital, on behalf of our entire team and all of Duke Health, I'd like to thank you for being here today. And I'd like to thank you for allowing me to be here with you today to join you as we honor the memory of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. It's a chance for us to come together and understand not only how far we've come, but also how we as individuals and a community must strive to do more. As we all know, it's a very interesting time for us as a nation, a time when our connectedness as a people is being tested, a time when hatred has crept up out of hiding to stand tall and speak boldly. As a parent, teacher, and now as a leader in healthcare and at Duke Hospital, I've seen firsthand it's a time when we're all struggling with very difficult conversations. Whether at the dinner table at night with our family, on teaching rounds as a physician and faculty member at Duke, working with students and patients, or as a leader in meetings with staff and managers and others, we're struggling with feelings of division and loss, with misunderstanding and fear. As I've thought very deeply about this, not only with my transition into this new role, but over the past year, I've come to believe it's a time for us at Duke as a community and as leaders, mentors, teachers, and parents to understand we have just as much responsibility to heal and shape hearts as we have to mold minds by using lessons learned from the past to move away from destructive hate to constructive love. In preparing for my remarks today, I reflected on those moments this week which have left me most moved to act as a leader, most moved to do something more for the people around me, and the moments which have helped me find greater joy and meaning which in addition to action and leadership are necessary for us to sustain the energy and the momentum we need to move forward. And I realized the tremendous impact of so many experiences, including a celebration of our team members this past week who've given back to our community in really innovative and remarkable ways. We celebrated them with our Duke Hospital Martin Luther King Community Caregiver Award Luncheon. And I found the experience moved me not only to tears, but to the point of greater action. I had remarkable interactions this past week with learners around Duke as we were helping them find direction, whether in healthcare or in other aspects. We have a remarkable community here that's seeking to find greater ways to give back, not only to learn, but to prepare themselves to lead and change. But perhaps most importantly, as I was thinking through these last couple of weeks, I found the daily interactions with our team, with our patients, our community, whether demonstrating a caring touch in a time of sorrow, celebrating joy in a remarkable recovery, or expressing hope and gratitude to others. These moments helped me find not only personal resilience and joy, but helped me understand my role as a leader, our role as leaders in our community, and the need to do more. I believe it is as Dr. King said, those who are not looking for happiness are the most likely to find it, because those who are searching forget that the surest way to be happy is to find happiness in others. Just as Mayor Schewel and President Price said, this is a time for us to serve, a time for us to continue to find hope and inspiration in those around us, to be present in the moment and find meaning in those everyday interactions that we must celebrate. Another of my favorite statements from Dr. King relates love's power to triumph over hate. He said, "At the center of nonviolence stands the principle of love." I believe when we realize that every action, every conversation, every moment we spend in the presence of another human being is important, that's a life-changing moment. That's when we discover the joy in being present and living lives based on the principle of love. So I would thank you again for allowing me to share in this moment with all of you, and I hope that today you'll find additional joy and meaning, as I know I will, and take that forward in our lives to make a difference. Thank you all.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Ivory. I'm the president of the Black Student Alliance, senior. And as we gather in commemoration of the life and legacy of Dr. King, I cannot help but acknowledge how apt this occasion is. The story of Dr. King's life is in many ways a story of great triumph. It is also a lesson on the true nature of justice. For true justice does not simply quell isolated instances of injustice. True justice transforms. It is not interested in the status quo if the status quo is tolerant of oppression and violence. The advent of justice appears when law and order are not weapons against human dignity. And such is the soul of the movement from which Dr. King arose. As we sit in this chapel in reverence of justice, we sit also in reverence of the truly radical work that made such a day as this one possible. As we sit in this chapel in reverence of this man, we sit also in reverence of activism and political discomfort. We sit in reverence of the many poor Black and brown voices that do not have access to grand podiums such as these, but who birth the knowledge that shapes our collective ascension. We sit in reverence of the work of those who work in this tradition, and to invoke his legacy is to honor the emissaries of transformative justice that beat the pavement, sang songs, and filled jail cells both then and today. And as our understanding of justice continues to grow, we then recognize to be justice where we were not yet looking. I am not remiss in saying that it is appropriate to honor Dr. King by naming and honoring people such as Pauli Murray, Claudette Colvin, Angela Davis, and Marsha P. Johnson. This is because the tradition of the activists of the civil rights movement and after, some of whom were men but many of whom were not, is one that speaks back to racism as well as misogyny, homophobia, xenophobia, and all other forms of injustice and violence. Acknowledging this, it is my dear pleasure to join you all in celebrating this day. As we take in this moment, let us be moved to inspiration, action, and a love that fights as well as comforts. Thank you.
Surrendered my life to Christ. I'm moving forward.
You have risen with all power in your hand. You have given me a second chance. Hallelujah. Christ, I'm moving, not going back, moving ahead, here to declare to you, my past is over in you, things are made new, surrendered my life to Christ, I'm moving forward. I
My name is Melanie Walker, and I'm a second-year student at Duke Law, president of the Black Grad and Graduate and Professional Student Association. It is my great pleasure to introduce Sherilyn Ifill. From the start of her career, Ms. Ifill has been dedicated to fighting for equal rights in America and to racial justice education. After receiving her JD from the New York University School of Law, she completed a year fellowship with the ACLU. From there, she joined the NAACP Legal Defense Fund's New York office as assistant counsel, where she litigated Voting Rights Act cases. Among her successful litigation was the landmark Voting Rights Act case, Houston Lawyers Association versus Attorney General of Texas, in which the Supreme Court held that the judicial elections are covered by the provisions of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. After 5 years, Ms. Ifill left LDF to join the faculty of the University of Maryland School of Law, where, in addition to teaching civil procedure and constitutional law in a variety of seminars, she continued to litigate and consult on a broad and diverse range of civil rights cases, while grooming the next generation of civil rights lawyers. In addition to teaching in the classroom, Ms. Ifill launched several innovative legal courses while at Maryland Law School, including an environmental justice course in which students represented rural communities in Maryland, and one of the first legal clinics in the nation focused on removing legal barriers to formerly incarcerated persons seeking to responsibly re-enter society. Ms. Ifill is also a critically acclaimed author. In 2011, she published On the Courthouse Lawn, Confronting the Legacy of Lynching in the 21st Century. Her book reflects her lifelong engagement in and analysis of racial issues and American public life. In 2012, Ms. Ifill was named the 7th President and Director Counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund. As President and Director Counsel, she has led the organization in litigating Shelby County versus Holder in 2013 and Fisher versus University of Texas Austin in 2016. Ms. Ifill has received several awards for her civil rights work. In addition to speaking at New York University and Bard University's 2015 convocation ceremonies, both universities also awarded her with honorary LLD degrees. She has appeared on CNN, NBC, ABC, C-SPAN, National Public Radio, and was also a regular contributor to The Root. Ms. Ifill served as the board chair of U.S. programs for the Open Society Foundations from 2011 to 2013, afterwards moving to serve on the organization's global board. She has also served on the boards of Equal Justice Works, the National Constitution Center, the Learning Policy Institute, and the National Women's Law Center. Through all these accomplishments, it is clear Ms. Ifill embodies the principles that Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King fought for and that Colin Kaepernick continues to fight for. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Sherilyn Ifill as this year's keynote speaker for the Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Service.
Thank you so much. I was just actually enjoying the program. I didn't want to get up to speak. I just have been listening to these wonderful remarks and these wonderful presentations. So good afternoon to all of you, and I'm just delighted to be here with you to commemorate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. I want to begin by just thanking so many people who have made it possible for me to be here today. First and foremost is Dr. Benjamin Reese, your Vice President for Institutional Equity, who extended the invitation to me to come today. And I also want to thank Sharon Capel, the program coordinator. Where's Sharon? Where'd she go? There she is. Who really provided all the assistance we needed to organize my stay here. I want to greet Mayor Schewel and thank him for that really extraordinary speech and set of remarks. President Price, who hasn't been here long, but he has made a difference. Yeah, we should acknowledge that. I want to thank him for his leadership and for his warm welcome. All of the student leaders, Melanie and Michael, who spoke and who represent our future, and whose clarity should convict us to do better. And all of the performers today who inspired us, the dancers and the drummers and the musicians who just performed and who lifted our hearts. I also want to thank Rabbi Friedman and really want to thank Reverend Powery for his remarks and for his extraordinary invocation, which really set the mood. You don't know this, Reverend Powery, but my longtime pastor and friend, Reverend Dr. Ann Leitner Fuller, knows that I speak all over the country, and I do it so much that I'm quite comfortable speaking publicly, except when I stand in somebody's pulpit, and then I get nervous. So I want to thank you for allowing me to stand at the sacred desk. I take it very seriously, what it means to be in a house of faith and speak to people about the issues to which I have devoted my life. So, yes, I'm grateful to be here, and I have to tell you, I look forward to this weekend every year because for me it really sets and frames the beginning of my year. It compels me to pause, despite all the craziness going on, and stop and honor the work of a great American. And every year in the days before King Day, I spend time listening to his speeches. I have a nice box set of CDs and reading about the challenges he faced and the difficulty of his work. And every year I learn something new, something that provides fuel and food for my own work and that encourages me to keep fighting for justice and equality and peace. But even the day itself, the fact there is such a thing as Martin Luther King Day and weekend, when cities and universities and elected officials and community groups and churches and synagogues and mosques all over the country pause to commemorate the life of Dr. King and the work of civil rights, that is its own extraordinary accomplishment. The activism and tenacity of those who fought for the holiday is itself a testament to the power of grassroots activism and the importance of mobilizing, not just for elections and candidates, but also to demand the acknowledgement of our history and of our greatest heroes. As Dr. Reese said, I lead the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, which, for those of you who don't know, is a separate organization from the NAACP. We were once the same organization. We split in 1957. Our organization was founded in 1940 by Thurgood Marshall and led by him for many years. It's the organization that began a course of strategic work aimed at using the law and the courts to end American apartheid and to achieve racial justice and equality for African Americans. It matters that LDF was an organization created by black lawyers initially. Our staff is multiracial, but it matters that in 1940, black lawyers created this organization. Its very existence, in fact, at that time was a statement about the power of black intellectuals and professionalism. And the standard we've maintained over the course of 78 years is a unique one. It's very difficult to be hired, I can tell you, as an LDF lawyer. Because, as I always say, LDF lawyers have to be excellent writers and meticulous researchers and brilliant litigators, but that's the easy part. LDF lawyers also have to be as comfortable, as eloquent and persuasive in a community meeting, in a church basement, as we are in the well of the United States Supreme Court. And there are not many lawyers for whom that is true. So I'm privileged to lead a staff of extraordinary lawyers, organizers, researchers, and support staff dedicated to the fight for racial justice and equality. I myself was a young LDF lawyer from 1988 to 1993, as you heard. The director counsel who hired me and under whom I served was LDF's third director counsel and North Carolina's own Julius Chambers. A man of such extraordinary courage, brilliance, and dedication, it's hard to think of a parallel. Mr. Chambers created the first integrated law firm in the South, then Ferguson Chambers Stein and now Ferguson Sumter. The firm worked with LDF on literally scores of cases over the years. Mr. Chambers himself litigated over 70 desegregation cases against school districts in the state of North Carolina. And during the time that he litigated the landmark desegregation case, Swan versus Charlotte Mecklenburg School District, both his home and his office were firebombed. When he was asked his reaction to the firebombing, Julius, in his very Julius way, a man of few words, said, "You just keep fighting." He later went on to serve as the chancellor at North Carolina Central University, then created the Center for Civil Rights at the University of North Carolina Law School, a center that has unfortunately been under attack by the Board of Regents for the past 2 years, and that center is now headed by LDF's 5th Director Counsel, my friend Ted Shaw, a brilliant civil rights lawyer and leader in his own right. We also litigated a North Carolina case that became one of the most important Supreme Court cases of the 20th century, the seminal employment discrimination case, Griggs versus Duke Power Company. The case was decided the same year as Swan, and it was argued by LDF's 2nd Director Counsel, Jack Greenberg. It established the principle that we now all take for granted, that employers must have a bona fide reason for the tests or qualifications associated with a job. The court's decision in this case literally transformed the American workplace, creating opportunities for African Americans and women to have access to jobs from which they had been barred by arbitrary rules and tests designed to keep them out of certain fields. I don't want to skip over this. This is important because that's 2 North Carolina cases that transformed the American public school system and the American workplace. Those 2 cases decided in 1 year came out of this state. Now, what does that mean? We can talk about the lawyers and we can talk about the Supreme Court, but understand that what this means is that ordinary North Carolinians were willing to risk their livelihood and in some cases their lives to organize and to serve as plaintiffs to challenge entrenched and unjust structures of inequality. And their courage ultimately changed this entire country. There are literally hundreds of cases on LDF's docket since our formation that we've litigated in North Carolina. Our connection to the lawyers of this state and to the communities here is deep and lasting. And then, of course, to be here at Duke, where Dr. King spoke in 1964, for all of these reasons, I'm deeply honored to spend at least a part of this weekend with you this year. Dr. Reese told me weeks ago that the theme of your event today is From King to Kaepernick, Progress Through Protest. And I thought, terrific, because we started last year, 2017, with one of the largest mass marches ever in this country, the Women's March. We've seen the Take a Knee protests in the NFL over the past 2 years. The hashtag #MeToo protests has lifted up the issue of sexual harassment in the workplace. Protests against police violence against unarmed African Americans continues throughout the country. And of course, protests against Civil War monuments exalting generals and leaders of the Confederacy have been taking place all over the country, including here in Durham. And I do think it's important. I'm glad that Mayor Schewel referred to it, to President Price's important action in removing the Robert E. Lee statute from outside this chapel. I know people maybe think these things are not important, but they are important. That which we exalt reveals what we value and treasure and what our highest aspirations are. And so I want to thank again President Price for the action that he took here. The organization I lead has a long history representing protesters. We represented the Selma marchers in 1965, working with John Lewis and Hosea Williams to draw up the plan that ultimately was accepted by the court to resume the march after the violence of Bloody Sunday. We represented Muhammad Ali when he refused to submit to the draft for the Vietnam War and lost his boxing license. We represented freedom riders and lunch counter protesters and marchers all over the country. In 1968, our then Director Counsel Jack Greenberg met with Dr. King in March to discuss LDF's representation of participants in the Poor People's Campaign. And we agreed that we would represent the protesters, and we honored that agreement after Dr. King's shocking assassination a month later. But of course, lawyers and protesters are not the same. We represent protesters. We are most often not out on the front line ourselves, although I have been known to participate in marches when I'm not on duty. So I want to be clear today that I cannot speak from the perspective of a protester. But the goals of civil rights lawyers and protesters share the commitment to fight for a just and fair society. We demand that this country respect the dignity and humanity of every person within our borders, and that the constitutional rights of citizens are entitled to protection. I have often said that civil rights work, whether lawyering or activism, is what I call democracy maintenance work. Those of us who do this work do the public service of identifying the flaws in our democracy, the places where our practices do not live up to our principles. Sometimes we find flaws that can more or less be easily repaired. Sometimes we find more serious problems that require a deeper intervention, a rewiring of the power grid and connections in our democracy. And sometimes we find dangerous rot at the foundation of our democracy. And when we find this, then this requires a broader, deeper collective plan to first clean out the rot, to reveal its extent and its ugliness, and then to rebuild the foundation with strong, clean, new material that will ensure that we're building on a solid base that can withstand time and pressure and blows. And I believe that we are at just such a moment today. I'm proud to be a civil rights lawyer. It is, in my view, the highest calling of our profession. And I celebrate the work of my colleagues who are grassroots organizers and activists at organizations like Color of Change and Black Lives Matter and the NAACP, who are also engaged in the noblest of work. But whether we litigate or we participate in protests on the ground, we recognize that no one tactic can end injustice, and that the fight for justice and equality is a war that must be fought on multiple fronts. Every successful period of civil rights progress in this country has been marked by broad engagement of people from across our society, lawyers and activists, yes, but also artists and teachers and writers, politicians and faith leaders, journalists and healthcare workers, scientists, bankers, investors, and athletes. Perhaps because of our celebration of heroes of the civil rights movement, like Dr. King and Congressman John Lewis and Thurgood Marshall, there has become this pervading belief that the obligation to fight for the principles of democracy in which we all profess to believe, fairness, equality, due process, free speech, opportunity, should be undertaken by civil rights professionals. That it's the job of activists and organizers and civil rights lawyers to challenge inequality and call out injustice. This belief is perhaps the reason that so many people become angry when they see others taking a stand or speaking out about injustice. Athletes should run, jump, catch balls, swim, swing a racket for our entertainment, some believe, but should play no role as citizens in the necessary work of building this democracy. Singers and actors should entertain but never speak out about sexual harassment or racism. Why should an actor care that the water of Flint, Michigan is poisoned or that the sacred lands of the Standing Rock Sioux are threatened by the Dakota Pipeline? Doctors should diagnose and prescribe and operate, but never publicly show solidarity with those fighting against injustice. To many, when they do so, they are simply out of their place. But this is just wrong. It is the obligation of every citizen to do their part to sustain a democracy. And today, I feel, perhaps especially today, it's crystal clear and evident that unless every citizen of this country undertakes their duty to fight for justice and peace and equality and opportunity, this democracy will fail. It will require every single one of us to become the democracy maintenance workers in our own way if this country is to be saved from the abyss over which we currently teeter. We teeter over this abyss precisely because too many Americans have abdicated their obligation to take an active role in the everyday obligations of true citizenship and have left the fight for our democratic values and principles to others. We teeter on the abyss because too many Americans have abdicated their obligation to speak the truth. Many are frightened of the truth. Yes, it's a tough thing, in some ways an awful thing, to have to call out the President of the United States when he makes racist remarks. Even for someone like me, who does this work every day, it's painful. I barely slept Thursday night, racked with anger and grief at the debasement of our public discourse and of our country. I was overcome with disappointment and anger that we approached Martin Luther King weekend having to address this evidence of how far we have to go. But because of Dr. King's work and courage, because of his honesty and commitment, because Dr. King paid the ultimate price for our failures to deal with the terrible scourge of racism in this country, I will do what feels awful and sounds harsh for the cause of justice. It makes us uncomfortable, and we wish we could find a way to avoid the truth, but we are here today honoring a man who gave his life for this country. I say gave his life because that is what he did. It was not taken from him. He gave it. He spoke many times about how close the threat of death was to him. He was confronted by violent opposition on many occasions. He faced burning crosses and assaults. He saw the fallout of firebombs and assassinations. But he had committed himself to nonviolence and to being what he called a drum major for justice. And so he was prepared to give his life. And 50 years later, we have to ask ourselves, are we too timid to even speak the truth? Journalists skirt around the issues. Politicians say we should not engage in name-calling. We've come up with synonyms for racism so that we can avoid seeing what stares us in the face. We would not call it what it was when the first African-American president was subjected to the kind of insults, challenges, and indignities that every black pioneer, from Jackie Robinson to the Little Rock Nine to Arthur Ashe to Vivian Malone and Harvey Gantt, have had to face. We pretended that the treatment of the first black president was not a warning that we still had a long way to go. When he was denigrated for not wearing a jacket in the Oval Office, or when a major university would not give him an honorary degree because their alumni protested, this in the first year he was in office. When the president was heckled by a congressman during a joint session of Congress, when he was compelled to prove his legitimacy as a natural-born American by the very man who now occupies the presidency, many pretended that these were not ominous signs that the dark and dangerous rot of racism was still corroding the foundations of our democracy. And so here we are in 2018, a time in which American-born and raised young men who called themselves Nazis and march with impunity carrying flags with swastikas in the streets of our cities, in which we expel from our country people who have lived here for decades, having fled violence and persecution in their own countries. We're here in 2018 having decided as national policy to turn our backs on the sacred trust of protecting this planet from environmental degradation. We're here in 2018 having given such license to white supremacy that hate crimes have risen in every region in our country. Timothy Kaufman was killed in New York City last year by a young white man who traveled to Baltimore for the purpose of killing black men and killed him with a sword on the street in Midtown. 2 white men were killed in Portland, Oregon for coming to the aid of a young Muslim woman who was being taunted by a white supremacist on the light rail in that city last year. Heather Heyer was killed in Charlottesville by a white supremacist, and that's just 3 of the murders, not to mention the countless assaults and attacks on Muslim women wearing hijab, on Asian Americans and African Americans, on churches and synagogues, all a testament to the pervasiveness and growing violence of white supremacy. We're here in this time, unable and unwilling to contain the scourge of gun violence, even when it touches our little children in their schools, parishioners worshiping at church, and when it leaves countless women who live in the terror of domestic violence in utter captivity to violent partners. We're here in this time in 2018 when millions of our fellow citizens lived and still live without electrical power for months on the island of Puerto Rico, many without clean water, without hot food after the devastation of a hurricane. We have watched this. We have read about it. Maybe we have even lamented it. But we must accept that we have allowed this to happen on our watch because we believed perhaps that it was someone else's job, some elected official or government agency or activist organization fighting for the Latinx community, someone else's responsibility to compel the proper and decent response to a humanitarian crisis within our own borders. We're here in this time, 150 years after the passage of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, the amendment that was required nearly 100 years after that most shameful compromise at the root of our country's formation, the compromise that denied full citizenship and personhood to African Americans. We're here 150 years after the passage of the 14th Amendment, and 147 years after the end of the Civil War, still fighting for the full ability of African Americans to vote and participate equally in the political process. Just last year, 2 federal courts found that states had engaged in intentional racial discrimination in passing voter suppression statutes designed to keep black people from voting. Think about what this means. The legislatures of 2 states in this country met and collectively enacted statutes designed to undermine the ability of black people to vote. Not in the 19th century, not in the 20th century, but in the 21st century. This happened on our watch. Of course, one of those states was the state of North Carolina. Your legislature in 2013 passed a law containing a series of measures that the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals described as having surgical precision in the effort to suppress the votes of African Americans. In Texas, we at the Legal Defense Fund litigated a case challenging Texas's voter ID law, and the federal court there found that the voter ID law also was racially discriminatory. It was the law that barred our clients, students at Prairie View A&M University, from using their state university ID to vote, but allowed the use of a concealed gun carry permit to vote. And just last week, the federal court found that the redistricting map used to elect North Carolina representatives to the United States Congress violates the United States Constitution. I want to remind you that these laws were passed before the candidacy of Donald Trump. It was not Mr. Trump who compelled the legislatures of those states to seek to deny the right that the Supreme Court has described as preservative of all rights, the right to vote. The passage of these laws should have sounded an alarm across the nation, an alarm that something was very wrong, something at the foundation of our democracy that demanded our collective attention. And, of course, there's the issue of police violence against unarmed African Americans. Not a new issue in America. Sheriff Joe Arpaio was and is a disgrace to law enforcement, but so was Sheriff Bull Connor in Birmingham and Sheriff Willis McCall in Lake County, Florida, and on and on. The killing of unarmed African Americans by law enforcement has been a key civil rights issue for decades. It occupied Thurgood Marshall in the 1940s, Julius Chambers and Elaine Jones in the 1990s as director counsels of the Legal Defense Fund, and it occupies me today. But it was not until the technology of cell phones allowed courageous people to show America the truth of these killings. Eric Garner choked to death on a New York City street corner saying, "I can't breathe," 11 times before his death. Walter Scott running for his life from a police officer who took aim and shot him in the back in a public park. 12-year-old Tamir Rice playing alone with a toy gun in a park, shot by a police officer within seconds. Philando Castillo bleeding to death in the passenger seat of a car while his terrified girlfriend narrates his death on Facebook and her brave and beautiful daughter tries to comfort her devastated mother. Terrence Crutcher with his hands up, shot to death by Officer Betty Shelby on a road in Tulsa, Oklahoma, while we hear the tape of another police officer observing the encounter from a helicopter thousands of feet above, who purports to be able to see that Mr. Crutcher, an unarmed black man, is a bad dude. It's only those videos that have convinced some to believe that we have a problem that threatens the integrity of our justice system and that rightfully alienates African Americans around the country from our justice system. And yet, the use by law enforcement officials of the state using brutal life-ending power against unarmed citizens with impunity is widely recognized around the world as a sign that a democracy is in trouble. These videos sounded an alarm among young people who took to the streets, and too often they were met with tanks and batons and tear gas. It should have sounded an alarm, not just in black communities or in the corridors of the Legal Defense Fund or in the community meetings of Black Lives Matter. This evidence of one of the most frightening manifestations of democracy's end should have sent shock waves of activism throughout the country and throughout every home. Employees should have been huddling at every workplace to discuss what they can do. Every church, every temple, every mosque should have become a place of discussion and planning for peaceful protests and moral engagement to confront this danger. But to the contrary, strong forces have attempted to stifle the impulse of justice-minded people to speak and act against the growing tide of injustice in our country. When one talented and upright young man of conscience on one team in one professional sport in one city quietly sat and then quietly took a knee during our national anthem to draw attention to the issue of police violence, he was vilified, lambasted, and some believe blackballed from his profession by those who audaciously called themselves patriots. Their success in capturing the narrative that Mr. Kaepernick's protest is about the flag or the military is itself its own alarm. It shows us that the symbols of our national identity have been hijacked and are now deployed to suppress and shut down the very actions that demonstrate the highest level of patriotism and civic engagement. We are in a moment when I truly believe that we are being driven to confront the rot in the foundation of our democracy that we have failed to remove. We have papered it over. We have chosen to just avoid going to the basement so as not to confront it. We have pretended that there is not this weakness at the core of our nation, and so it has spread. And it is now weakening every pillar of our democracy. That rot, racism, has weakened us as a nation in every way. Americans can be so easily manipulated by race that people around the world know it. The evidence now shows that Russian hackers and trolls used fake Facebook and Twitter posts to stir up racial animus and tension during the 2016 election. That means we've reached the point that our racism has become a national security vulnerability. Its ugly rhetoric and the irrational and mean-spirited policies it inspires are often what we see now every day advanced by this president, but he did not create it. And he did not keep us as a nation from tending to this rot that we had every reason to know was eating away at the foundations of our democracy for decades. Dylan Roof entered a church meeting in Charleston, South Carolina, and killed 9 black people at a prayer meeting well before Mr. Trump announced his bid for the presidency. We are here because we have abdicated our responsibility to do what concerned citizens must do. Join together in unity to confront the problems and excesses that threaten the vitality of our democracy. We failed as a nation to take up the responsibility of the daily fight for the world we wish to see. We took our foot off the gas. We substituted an appetite for lurid stories and unusual and bizarre personalities to supplant the hard work required to make good policy and pass sound laws. That's the bad news. So how can we chart a different path? First, we have to roll up our sleeves and prepare for a protracted period of hard work. All is not lost, but we just have to have the courage and the willingness to do what generations before us did at particular moments in our history. Whether it was to fight against fascism in World War II or in the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents did not shirk their obligation to work for our future. And we cannot shirk our obligation to work for the future of those young people who you saw come up this aisle full of power and passion and optimism and brilliance. I know you've been doing your part here in North Carolina. I'm thrilled to hear about your University Commission on Memory. That in and of itself is vitally important to confront the violence of forgetting. Suppressed history and gaslighting is its own form of violence, and I'm thrilled to hear that you're doing that. You encourage me in North Carolina. Your engagement in the moral majority movement. Many of you went out to the State House to protest. You have lifted up visionary leaders like the Reverend William Barber. You've compelled yourself to confront your past and to engage with the history of the Wilmington race riot of 1898. You've been galvanized to engage in real battles around equality and justice. Reverend Barber's now launched a Poor People's Campaign, and it's spreading across the nation, and it's exciting and encouraging to see people joining it. And you started that here in North Carolina. You, once again, were the place that began a movement that I believe is going to be an important part of transforming this country. And civil rights lawyers have been winning in court, whether it's our win in challenging Texas's voter ID law, the North Carolina voting case litigated by brilliant civil rights lawyers like Anita Earl, who I think is here today and is now a candidate, I believe, for the state Supreme Court of North Carolina. Should check her out. Our wins in courts in the Muslim ban cases, the recent decision protecting Dreamers, goodness, we litigated the president's voter fraud commission out of existence. So we've been winning some cases. I'm proud and pleased and encouraged that the rule of law has been holding steady. But we need more, and we need to do more than just hold the line. We need to imagine and fight for greater justice. I'm just ambitious enough to believe that at this moment of retraction, we should be even more ambitious in our vision for equality and justice. We need a radical vision to move us forward. We need to vote in every election, and then to demand that those who we elect represent us to fight for a radical vision that elevates us. I'm a deeply optimistic person. It's impossible to lead an organization like the Legal Defense Fund and not be optimistic. Think about our early years and what the walk of those lawyers meant. A group of African-American lawyers led a strategic plan to use the law to reshape the contours of American democracy. Thurgood Marshall and Jack Greenberg and Constance Baker Motley and Robert Carter had never themselves seen the world they attempted to create when they created the plan to end racial segregation. They had a bold and radical vision of what could be, and then they worked over years, decades, relentlessly until the thing they imagined became reality. And if we choose to do so, we can be as radical in our vision and as relentless in our work. I was just sharing with my staff last week that one of the advantages of doing this work for a long time and working as we do in multiple communities across the country in the areas of education and criminal justice, economic justice, and voting is that you get to see the interconnectedness of seemingly disparate systems of oppression. You have to be able to first recognize the problem. A civil rights activist once told me that racism, he said, is a shapeshifter. And our job is to learn to see it in its many guises. And if you're humble enough to regard yourself as a student of this work, as I do, even as you become an expert, you begin to be able to see it in all its guises. Our job, I told our staff, is to see the architecture of injustice and racism, not just incidents of racism, but the architecture, the scaffolding, and then to dismantle it and to provide the communities we represent with the tools to build a new architecture of justice and equality in its place. So I want to end by briefly talking with you about what I believe is the most urgent project before us at this moment in a country that is as fractured and divided as I've ever seen it in my lifetime. And the project that I think we must embark upon is reclaiming the importance of public life. Because I believe that the most successful guise that racism has assumed over the last 60 years has been to hide itself within the broader attack on public life and public engagement. Beginning with our success in Brown versus Board of Education, public life has been under attack by forces of oppression. Public life was important and regarded as worthy of national investment when it was believed that white people would get the greatest benefit from it. When Brown threatened that white control of public goods, white supremacists began a systematic attack on public goods that has allowed racism to infect every decision about public resources, policies, practices, and laws, all without ever mentioning race, which is why the project on racial equity that the mayor described earlier is so important. As Richard Rothstein, a fellow in LDF's Thurgood Marshall Institute, wrote in his acclaimed 2016 book, The Color of Law, public housing was originally built for low-income whites. Federally insured mortgage instruments were created and offered on a segregated basis such that the wealth of almost every white family that owned a home, certainly before the passage of the Fair Housing Act in 1968, can be traced to explicit governmental racial discrimination. The GI Bill was designed to help soldiers coming home from World War II have access to free college and home ownership. The billions of dollars pumped into the creation of the interstate highway system made the creation of the white suburbs possible. These were massive public investments made principally for the benefit of white Americans. Public universities were segregated and held for whites in the South until lawyers at the Legal Defense Fund, Thurgood Marshall and Constance Baker Motley and many others, sued to desegregate them. Investments in public transportation were regarded as critical to the economic growth of cities. But the massive resistance to Brown versus Board of Education began a project in which whites, first throughout the South and later even in the North, came to equate investments in public life with black people. In other words, once it was understood that public goods would have to be shared on an equal and non-segregated basis, the interest in public investment dissipated. Suddenly, public education was starved for funds. In fact, in the early years after Brown, Southern whites used public school funds to open private white academies until we sued to outlaw the practice. And heads up, don't think that the current education secretary is not working towards a very similar effort today, and we may have to sue again. I mark the closing of the schools in Prince Edward County, Virginia, as a crucial national moment. Rather than offer integrated public education, the school board of Prince Edward County, Virginia, closed the public schools from 1959 to 1964. 5 years. Whites sent their children to private academies. Blacks were left to send their children to relatives in other counties or states, or simply to accept the interruption of their children's education for 5 years. This happened in America, the denial of education to public school students for 5 years rather than integrate. And this post-Brown period, this fight over public schools in Virginia and North Carolina and Boston and Detroit, marked the beginning of a narrative that associated that which is public with race. Just think about it. Public housing, I just said, was built for low-income whites, but when you think about public housing today, it's regarded as a public good created for black and brown people. If I say public transportation, once again, it carries an image of racial minorities using its services. Most people who receive public assistance are white, and yet welfare and Medicaid carry the image of black people as recipients. And so our societal narrative has come to lionize and value the private over the public. Private schools are private cars rather than public transportation, private homes as far from our neighbors as possible. But I believe that the only way to repair the rot at the foundation of our democracy is to reclaim the value of public life, to invest in the public structures that bring us together, in which we can most readily see our shared destiny. I do not suggest this because I think that such a course will only help black people. Those white people who purport to suffer from economic anxiety have also been harmed by our disinvestment from public life. It is a price many of them have been willing to pay in exchange for the intoxicating but empty high of feeling superior to black people. But they too need the return on investment in public goods. And our democracy needs it. A democracy, especially a multiracial, pluralistic democracy, one that is the American experiment, will only survive and thrive if we're able to see ourselves as connected in a common project, if we are compelled to focus on what knits us together rather than what separates us. We need investments in infrastructure, public transportation, our water systems, our rail lines, our electrical grid. We need to invest in our voting system so that every voter can have confidence in the safety and security of our election system. But most of all, we must invest in public education. Along with voting, a shared system of quality public education is essential to a functioning and fair democracy. And perhaps we've forgotten that the Supreme Court recognized this in Brown. Yes, we remember Brown for what it said about segregated education harming African American children in the South, but we must also remember that the court in Brown said two other things. First, the court described education as the single most important function of local government. Not football stadiums or lotteries, but public education as the single most important function of local government. Ask yourself whether you believe that your local government regards public education as that important. Why is it so important? Why is it the single most important function of local government? The Supreme Court told us the answer to that in Brown as well. The second thing we may have forgotten is that the Supreme Court in Brown described education as the very foundation of citizenship. And we have forgotten this at our peril. We have focused on test scores and graduation rates, all very important. but we have forgotten that public education is the crucible in which we form the sense of citizenship of young people. That is in large measure why segregated education is dangerous. It allows for the formation of citizenship in an environment that is artificial and exclusionary. It fails to prepare our children, black, white, brown, to exercise citizenship in our democracy. And I emphasize again, not just black children, but white children. The Supreme Court never mentioned it in Brown, but in our presentation in the Brown case, we provided expert testimony that racial segregation in public schools harms not only black children, but white children as well. And unless we turn this around, all of our work as civil rights and justice warriors will be in vain. It's a project that will take decades to fix, but we must take this on. It's the project of democracy and citizenship, and it will compel us to confront the truth that structural and widespread racial inequality cannot exist within a healthy democracy. Racism, unaddressed, untreated, and today freed from even the confines of shame and taboo, will surely destroy our democracy. If we had any doubt before, this past year should make that plain. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that public education is costly, that our political system is broken, that this is an entrenched problem with no solution. But understand that we are always making investments. The only question is where we will choose to make those investments. 30 years ago, we decided to make massive investments that were a failure. Rather than invest in addressing the root causes of poverty or investing in schools and jobs and mental health services, we chose as a nation to place our investments in the criminal justice system. We developed a system that has grown to 5 times the size it was in 1970. It was an investment in mass incarceration, and it was a bad investment, driven by racism and stereotypes, narrow economic interests, and short-sighted policy. And now, when, despite what you hear from the current Attorney General, and with the exception of a very few very specific cities in our country, violent crime is at an all-time low, we have the opportunity to make other kinds of investments. Can we make them tomorrow? No. Clearly, our political system is such that there's no will to embrace a vision at this moment for the future of this country that imagines the kind of investments I've described. And so we must support a political system and actors in it who will embrace that vision. Dr. King said in 1965 at the close of the Selma to Montgomery March that this is precisely what we must do. He encouraged us to march on the ballot box until race baiters leave the political arena. He said we must march on segregated housing and segregated schools, and he reminded us that marching is biblically encouraged, that Joshua was encouraged by God to march his people around the walls of Jericho 7 times until they came crumbling down. So we must engage in nonviolent protests in the streets and online. We must decide that we'll fight for justice and equality wherever and however we can. And of course, at LDF, we'll do our part in the courts, along with many other civil rights lawyers. We'll continue to file cases that expose the architecture of racism. We'll show up in Congress and in the State House, at school board meetings, and before those agencies that advance policy. We'll hold our own profession accountable, where lawyers and judges and prosecutors fail to confront injustice. We'll continue to fight to put the tools in your hands that will allow you to construct the scaffolding for a new and just America. But this is a fight in which everyone must join. Each one of us must be vigilant every day and take up our responsibility to fight for our democracy. I'm reminded of what Dr. Martin Luther King told us a year after the Montgomery bus boycott began, when he returned from Africa, where he and his wife, Coretta Scott King, attended the independence ceremony for the Republic of Ghana. And I feel like I must make this reference today, given the monstrous remarks our president made on Thursday about the continent of Africa. Civil rights leaders so often enjoyed a relationship of collegiality and shared purpose with emerging leaders from Africa. Thurgood Marshall took a leave from LDF to travel to Ghana to assist his friend, Kwame Nkrumah, with whom he had been classmates at Lincoln University, and he assisted in the writing of their first constitution. LDF has enjoyed for many years a close relationship with civil rights lawyers in South Africa, and indeed our second director counsel, Jack Greenberg, helped with the formation of the Legal Resources Center in South Africa. But when King returned from Ghana, he gave a speech in which he described 4 lessons he took from observing the Ghanaian road to independence from British rule. And I leave you with these 4, and I'll take my seat. First, King said that the Ghana experience showed him that the oppressor never voluntarily gives freedom to the oppressed. Do not believe, King said, that freedom will roll out on the wheels of inevitability. It will require on our part, he said, persistent revolt and persistent agitation, or as King liked to say, we've got to keep on, keep it on. Second, King said that the Ghanaian transition to independence from British rule proved that the people can break loose from oppression without taking up violence, that it is possible to do this peacefully. Third, he said, the struggle of the Ghanaians demonstrated that freedom is never easy. King said prophetically in 1957, you better get ready, he said, for some homes and churches to be bombed and to have some bad things said about you. He cautioned, there will be hours of despair. That's the long story of freedom. He said there will be temporary setbacks and periods of tension. And finally, King said that Ghana's history and journey to independence demonstrated that the forces of the universe, and this I love, are on the side of justice. He said that no matter what it looks like, the old order is passing away and a new order is coming in. And I believe this, I know this to be true. You must know it too. Those who stand in opposition to injustice know it as well. That's why they're fighting so hard to hold on. But this change won't just happen. I believe, as I know Dr. King did, that we've got to push the old order out and usher the new order in. And I am ready. Because you are here this evening, I know that you are too. Thank you very much.
You are the strength
Let us pray. To the most awake and present God, we remember your strength and might that was with Moses as you delivered the children of Israel from oppression. We remember your empowering of Esther to speak on behalf of her people. We remember how the Spirit of the Lord anointed Isaiah to preach the gospel to the poor, liberate the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, and to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. We remember the courage you gave to Harriet Tubman to return back south and liberate others. We remember the determination you gave to Rosa Parks to remain seated on the bus that fateful day. Lord, we remember the sheer endurance in the hours of despair that you gave to Martin Luther King Jr. to prophetically declare why America may go to hell and speak truth to power. Awesome God, we remember how you ordained the work of Constance Baker Motley, Fannie Lou Hamer, and Shirley Chisholm. And Lord, we remember your power when Colin Kaepernick stayed in his seat. He found a good fight and decided to get into it. So Lord, grant us your strength and your might and your determination to do the work of democratic maintenance work, to not just speak truth to power, but to speak a truth that empowers. Lord, grant us the peace and the foresight to engage in public life so that justice rolls down like a river and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. We offer up this prayer in the name of the Almighty God and our elder brother Jesus. Together we pray and say, Amen. Please stand if you are able for the singing of We Shall Overcome.
Deep in my